Okay, we are on 30. We're moving a little bit. Thank you, Baruch Hashem. Amar Rav Chisda. The bottom of the page of Lamed Het Amar Aleph. It's Lamed. It's 39A3. Okay, 39A3. Amar Rav Chisda. So Rav Chisda says the following. Mimaisa from the story. Now we're turning the page. 39B1. Mimaisa she'asa anshe Taveria. Right, remember the story of the people of Tiberia? They went ahead and they had a pipe, and they had a way Rashi learns in Gemara. There was a pipe of cold water that they set up before Shabbat. They set up this pipe, and had the water and they put this pipe. The water should the pipe should be going through the hot springs of Tiberia. The hot springs of Tiberia, the water is not smelly. It's not so good. I don't know if you ever saw those waters of Tveria. According to the opinion that says that the hot springs they run through the entranceway of Gehenna. Maybe that's why it doesn't smell so good. And not only is it hot because of that, but the other opinion does not say that it goes through the entranceway of Gehenna. We had two opinions in the Gemara. But the story was that they thought they have a system. They want to have their water heated up for Shabbat. So they set up this pipe. The water would go through the pipe. And because the pipe was sitting in the springs of Tiberia, the water heated up. So the Mishnah stated, whatever water was heated up on the Shabbat itself, even though you set up the pipe before Shabbat, that water would be forbidden to be used. And then the Gemara says, so Rav Chizah says, from the story of the people of Tiberias, of Tiberia, that made this pipe before Shabbat. And yet, even though they made the pipe before Shabbat, right? See, if you go ahead and you cook a food before Shabbat, and the food is still cooking on the Shabbat, right? We spoke about the idea of, if it was 50% cooked before Shabbat, about it continually cooking on Shabbat, or if you have to go ahead and cover the fires and it can continually be cooking, and you have to put a blech. But here, there's a different issue, the way he's learning. Here, the issue is there was insulation issue. Because the cold water was insulated with the pipe, which was in the water, which is in the hot water. And that is a new issue called hatmana, that you can't insulate a food before, not only on Shabbat itself, but even before Shabbat, you can't insulate a food in something that adds heat if the food is insulated, right? That means to say you wouldn't be able to take a pot before Shabbat, put it on the fire, and wrap the pot, even if it's fully cooked, and wrap the pot while it's on the fire in aluminum foil. Wrap the whole pot in the morning. Very good. So there's two types of cases of insulation. There's insulation that adds heat, and there's insulation that keeps the heat. So if you take a towel before Shabbat and you wrap the towel, you take the pot of soup. You don't want to keep fires on Shabbat. You don't want the blech on. It's a summertime. Everything is hot. So what do some people do? They'll make a soup, a boiling hot soup before Shabbat. If you want to notify the people, thank you. And they'll go ahead and before Shabbat, they'll take the pot, right before candle lighting, they'll take the pot off the fire and they'll wrap it in a towel. And they'll wrap the pot in a towel very well on all four sides, completely wrapped. That's fine before Shabbat. Why? Because the towel does not add any heat. The towel is only what? containing the heat. So if you did that before Shabbat, that's fine. You can't take the towel Friday night after Shabbat began, morning. You can't take the towel Friday night after Shabbat began and now take off the pot when the Shabbat began and then wrap it totally in the towel. So we have a distinction between something that, if it's something that does not add heat, there's a difference whether you insulate it before Shabbat or insulate it when? On Shabbat. So if something that doesn't add heat, if you insulate it on the Shabbat itself, it's a problem. Something that adds heat, it's even a problem insulating it before Shabbat. And what we say the reason was, is if you insulate it before Shabbat with something that adds heat, maybe they're going to go insulate it with the hot ash. And then they're going to go ahead and maybe stoke that hot ash on the Shabbat itself.
What is insulate?
If you insulate with hot ash, would mean let's say you wrap the pot. Let's say you have hot ash. Say you have a small pot. You have hot ash left over from the fire that was on before Shabbat, and now you're going to just put it in the put the pot wrapped in that. Put that hot ash all around the pot. Sounds like you would need a lot of ash to cover that pot. But maybe there's a concern. Maybe we'll see more about that. But you will wrap the pot in hot ash. And what's the problem before Shabbat if I wrap a pot in hot ash? Problem is that on Shabbat itself, I might come to stoke that ash. Good morning, Ronnie. Good to see you. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Because if I go ahead and before Shabbat wrap a pot in hot ash, come Shabbat, I might see that I want the food to be a little bit hotter. I might come to stoke that hot ash because there's still fire in that. So the story of the people of Tiberia, they had this pipe and they insulated the pipe with placing water inside this pipe. So the water was insulated and the pipe was running through something that adds heat. It was running through the springs of Tiberia. The springs of Tiberia is hot. The water's hot. It doesn't just, the springs don't just, it's not just containing the heat. What's happening is not just the containing of the heat. It's actually there's an additional heat that's happening. It's something, it adds heat to the water, to the food. So the pot, so to speak, is insulated with this pipe in the water what's adding heat. Right? So there's an insulation happening, not just containing heat. There's an insulation that, if you set it up before Shabbat, and if the water of Tiberia would just keep the heat going, then that would not be a problem because you set it up before Shabbat. Because the waters of Tiberia, it's hot water. Right. It's actually heating the water. Good morning. It's hot. If you actually touch the waters of Tiberia.
The tzedakah item is here now.
No, it's upstairs. It's coming out later over here. So that's an insulation that adds heat. So because it's an insulation that adds heat, we said that even we learned from here that insulation that adds heat, even if you set it up before Shabbat, still no good. Is that clear?
Yeah.
Okay. So the Gemara says, and the rabbis forbade it, but lahatmana, b'dava hamosef havel. This makes it forbidden for you to insulate with something that adds heat, even if you made the insulation before Shabbat. Even if you made the insulation before Shabbat, it's still prohibited. Now, Tosfos says, and the Gemara says, Ula says no. Ula disagrees. He says, halacha ka'anshe Tiberia. The law followed the people of Tiberia. Just like the people of Morning Levi, the people of Tiberia held that they did it. They actually made this piping. The rabbi said differently, but Ula's of the opinion that the rabbi's opinion was not was not a universal opinion. That maybe the people of Tiberia here they come back. But hello, everybody. We're back. Okay, we're sorry with a little bit technical difficulties of the internet. So Tosfos asks the question. If you look at the top Tosfos Lam Tes on the base, I mean, he says, "Toma umat sarach l'melech v'ma'asan Tiveria." What do we need to learn from Anshi Tiveria? You can't insulate with something that adds heat on Friday, even before Shabbat. Hamadisani, it's a mission later on. They ain't tom dova mosaf hevel. You can't insulate with something that adds heat. Perek bamet tom nim. Bodiomairi, and that's talking about you can't even insulate with something that adds heat even before Shabbat. The mechashecha, because if it's dark, I feel the dova she'ena mosaf hevel. Once it's Shabbat, you can't insulate even something that does not add heat. Like we said, Friday night comes. But you can't take the pot off the fire and then wrap it in a towel, even though the towel doesn't add heat on Shabbat itself. You can't do that. Before Shabbat, you can wrap it in the towel. So therefore, what do we need to learn from the story of people of Tiberia, the prohibition of insulating? We know there's a Mishnah later on. So for Omer Ri, so the Ri says, the Matnisin de Lakanman ikal ukma be'ben hashmashot. Maybe the Mishnah later on is talking about after sunset, before dark. So maybe that's where there will be a prohibition of insulating. But to insulate while it's actually daytime, Friday afternoon before Shabbat, when it's not in sunset, so that's the chidush. Chidush is that even when it's Friday afternoon, It's not, it wasn't twilight yet, you still can't go ahead and insulate the food. Even on, before candle lighting, if it's insulating with something that adds heat. And there's other answers I saw that it's coming to tell us that you can't, that you can, the food is forbidden to be eaten. Meaning, the Mishnah later on just says you can't do it. What happens if you went ahead and you did it? With something that adds heat, and the food was heated up as a result of that, the food is forbidden to have benefit until Motzei Shabbat, until Saturday night. Like that's what the rabbis tell them. The rabbis told them, if if the water that was heated up on Shabbat, you're not allowed to go ahead and drink. But if they did not, but if the insulation did not add heat, just kept the heat, then the food will not be forbidden. But so there's a new chidush, there's a new novelty that we're teaching us here, that the food is forbidden. That's our Mishnah. We won't know that from the Mishnah later on. It's another answer to why do we need this Meiser, from the story of Anshe Tiveria, and the rabbis forbade it. So we see that Hatmana, we learned this point about Hatmana, about insulation, that the food is also forbidden. The only question on the second approach is then the Gemara should have said, Rav Chisda should have said, from the story of Anshe Tiveria, and the rabbis forbade Asil Rabbanan, and the rabbis forbade them from using it. We see the prohibition. He should have said, we see that the food is forbidden. Not that he should have said, we see that it's nullified. You're not allowed to insulate with something that adds heat even before Shabbat. He should have said, we learned, if the whole chidush, if the whole novelty is that the food is forbidden, so then he should have said, or the drink is forbidden, he should have, because you insulate with something that adds heat, he should have said, from the story of Taveri, we learn that you can't even have the food. But the fact that he doesn't say that, he says from the story of Taveri, we see that it's forbidden to insulate even before Shabbat, seems to be indicating that, like Tosos's answer, that we learn from Taveri that not only Ben Hashmashot, not only after sunset, you cannot insulate with something that adds heat, but also, meaning even Ben Hashmashot, but also you can't even do that even if it's before sunset. Even if it's still daytime, you can't insulate with something that adds heat. Okay, now the Gemara continues. Ma'aseh she'asu anshe Tiveria. Now we're going to get into another subject now, Rabotai. The story of the people of Tiveria. And what did the Mishnah state? What did the rabbis tell the people from Tiveria? They told them, if you set it up before Shabbat, so the water that was set up before Shabbat, and actually the pipe that was set up before Shabbat, and the water that came through the pipe on Shabbat, the water that was heated up on Shabbat, that water, we forbade that water. It's like water that was heated on Shabbat. You can't benefit from it. You can't, and the rabbi said you can't wash in that water. You can't drink that water. And the rabbi said, if you did that before Yom Tov, if you set up this pipe before Yom Tov, so then we treat it like morning, Boker Tov. The minyan is the next minyan is Lamaila, upstairs at 7:30. So if you want, you could join us over here for some learning, or you want to go upstairs, whatever you want to do. No problem. And there's breakfast downstairs after the minyan. Now, then the Mishnah stated, if you set up this pipe before Yom Tov, and the water got heated up on Yom Tov. So we say we treat it like water that was heated up on Yom Tov. And water that was heated up on Yom Tov, the Mishnah says you could drink, right? You're allowed to heat up water on Yom Tov, right? You're allowed to cook on Yom Tov. But the Mishnah says you can't wash in that water that was heated up through this pipe of water that you set up in the waters, the springs of Tiberia, which gave heat to this water, and the water got heated up on the Shabbat. So we say that water is forbidden for washing. Now the Gemara is going to clarify what's going on. Why is the water forbidden for washing? Meaning, if you go ahead and you cook up water on Yom Tov, right? If you want to go wash your face with the hot water, we know you can wash your face with the hot water that you cooked up on Yom Tov, right? But you're allowed to cook on Yom Tov from a pre-existing fire, and you go ahead and you boil up. You want a tea, you want a coffee on Yom Tov, and you have a tea kettle in your house, and you have the fire on from before Yom Tov, right? The fire, we don't light a fire on Yom Tov. We light a fire from a pre-existing fire, right? We light a fire. We light candles from on Yom Tov from an existing candle. But if you wanted to have a coffee on Yom Tov or tea, you could take a tea kettle, fill it up with water, and put it on the fire. That you're allowed to do on Yom Tov, correct? And yet, and now if you want to take that water, you want to use it for washing your face, you heat up that water, you'd be allowed to use it for washing your face. So, on Yom Tov. So what we need to clarify, what are they saying that the water that was heated up through this pipe that was set up before Yom Tov in Tiberia, that there's a problem with that water for washing. There's no problem for drinking. So that's going to be, the Gemara is going to have to clarify that point. And then there's another point that's going to have to be clarified. We're saying that regarding if you set up this pipe before Shabbat, and now the water, and we say we treat the water that you set up into the hot springs of Tiberia like hot water that was cooked on Shabbat. And water that was cooked on Shabbat, you're telling me you can't benefit from the malacha, you can't benefit from the prohibited act of cooking on Shabbat. You have to wait till Saturday night to Motzei Shabbat, after Shabbat, to have that water. But we also say this water that was heated up on the Shabbat as a result of setting up the pipe is going to be forbidden for washing. So now, what kind of washing are we talking about? Are we talking about washing your whole body? Now, if it's talking about washing your whole body, the Gemara is going to say you can't even wash your whole body with water that was actually heated up before Shabbat, right? Water that was heated up before Shabbat, you can't wash with. You can't wash it, but you can't take a bath. We'll see about that. Let's see the Gemara. Well, I'm just giving you a little preview, if that's the right word, to what some of the issues the Gemara is going to discuss. Ma'isa she'osa anshi Tiberia, right? We're now on the article. We're on 39b1. So Ma'isa she'osa anshi Tiberia, and you're saying the rabbi said that this pipe that was set up in the springs before Shabbat, and now water came on Shabbat through this pipe, that water that was heated up on Shabbat as a result of this pipe is forbidden for washing, rechitza, or bathing, or washing. The question, how do you translate the word rechitza over here? That's what the Gemara is trying to understand. My rechitza, what type of washing do we say you can't go ahead and use this water that was heated up through the piping on the Shabbat? Set it up before Shabbat, but some water ran through on Shabbat, it got heated up. Which type of washing are you talking about? Washing your hands and face, washing your whole body. Washing is a very general word. It's not clear. What are you referring to? Ilema rechitzat kol gufo. If you're referring to washing your whole body, like bathing. Elachamish yuchmu b'Shabbat, but chamish yuchmu b'Shabbat hu dasurin. You're telling me the only water that you can't wash your body with on Shabbat is the water that was heated up on Shabbat. Hachamish yuchmu be'erev Shabbat mutarin. But are you telling me the water that was heated up before Shabbat? If you heated up water before Shabbat, you filled up a bathtub before Shabbat, are you going to tell me mutarin? Are you allowed to go ahead and go to a bathhouse on Shabbat that they heated up? The guy said, we heated up the water before Shabbat. You're not benefiting from it. It wasn't heated up on Shabbat. It still can't go to the bathhouse, even if it was heated up before Shabbat.
Because they were scamming.
Exactly, because the people, because the
If they weren't scamming.
what scamming it wouldn't be a problem. Because what would be the problem? Because you heated up before Shabbat. You didn't heat it up on Shabbat. But what happened was you had the wash house managers or owners, and they would, keep water hot on Shabbat without making a fire on Shabbat. It's not a simple thing, right? So therefore they played the game. What was the game they said? They said this water was heated up before Shabbat, but really it was not heated up before Shabbat.
Never
The scam,
today,
right? The scams are you always have people who when it comes to money, right? It's about money, right? They want to make money. They have a bathhouse. They want customers, and they're going to say that and they want to keep their customers happy. Everyone likes a nice hot bath. It's very healthy, very good for the body. People go to the schwitz, whatever they call it, right? So therefore, there was a very big concern. The rabbis saw, after they saw some of the bathhouse managers cooking the water, heating the water on Shabbat, and they claimed it happened before Shabbat. Right? We had something also in the Gemara also about something that it was a concern that people. Remember, the Gemara said there's an opinion that says that food that was cooked unintentionally, if you did something unintentionally, if we're going to allow it, then people are going to say, I did it unintentionally. We did do it intentionally, but they did it, but they're going to say they did it unintentionally, but really did it intentionally, right? We had that also in the Gemara, right? The Gemara on 38a. The Gemara says, if you cook b'Shabbat, right? The guy who 38a, they made a gezerah. They made a gezerah because the people, let's say if a person would cook on Shabbat unintentionally, right? Was that the case? Something like that. That they did something unintentional. If you would allowed it, then they would do it intentionally, and they would say they did it unintentionally, right? If you want to see that case over there, right? There was a certain case over there about people also. Maybe they'll be. See, the Jews were not suspected of desecrating the Shabbat in an Issa D'Oraita. Meaning the Jewish people wouldn't go ahead and say, I'm going to cook. They'll cook intentionally, say I did it unintentionally in order to allow the food to be eaten, right? Person would not, that far a person wouldn't go. But a rabbinic prohibition would say leaving a pot of food before Shabbat, right? That was the discussion. Leaving a pot of food before Shabbat in a manner that you should not have left it, cause of concern you might come to stoke it on the Shabbat, we're going to say that you can't benefit from that food that you left before Shabbat on the stove. Let's say you left it 10% cooked, and you're supposed to leave it 50% cooked, according to that opinion. Michael Ben Rusoi, if you're going to say, um, or let's say the other case, you left the pot of food on an open flame, right. You left the food on an open flame, and then you're going to come and say, "Oh, I forgot." So it comes to Shabbat, and it actually, cooked up on Shabbat, this food, but you left the food before Shabbat. So we said, what's the status of that food? So we're going to say the rabbi said you can't eat that food. Why? Because if you're going to allow the person to eat the food that he forgot and he left the fire on before removing the pot, you know what he's going to do? He's going to leave the pot there before Shabbat. And then on Shabbat, he's going to say, I didn't do it intentionally. I was a mistake. I forgot to take it off the fire. And that's the trick. So that would be, meaning that far they would go. They wouldn't go ahead and cook on Shabbat intentionally and say, I did it unintentionally. I cooked unintentionally. That's a biblical prohibition. But a rabbinic prohibition, people are not as strict sometimes. And they'll say, oh, it's only Rabbanan. You ever hear that? Oh, it's only Rabbanan, Because good morning, they'll say it's only rabbinic. They'll leave the food, because leaving the food on a fire before Shabbat, 10% cooked, and then it cooks on Shabbat, that's a rabbinic prohibition, because they didn't do anything on Shabbat. I left it before Shabbat. Therefore, people make that trick. They'll leave it there before Shabbat, and they'll say, I did it unintentionally. It comes Shabbat and it cooked. They'll say, I did it unintentionally, and it's a rabbinic prohibition I violated. So the rabbis would have said, most probably you could eat that food. But the rabbis say, no, we're not going to let you eat that food, because maybe you're going to come and make this trick, intentionally leave it from before Shabbat. And now, like you said over here, but seems to be a stronger problem. Here, we're concerned that they'll actually do a biblical prohibition, right? Over there, it's interesting, Adam, that the scam or the things they would do would be a rabbinic violation of leaving food on before Shabbat on stage that you should not leave it. But here, the concern was that they saw that some of the bathhouses, the people were actually heating the water on Shabbat. Heating the water on Shabbat in the bathhouses, saying that, you know what, we heated it before Shabbat. So therefore, the rabbi said, we cannot bathe your whole body. You can't go to the bathhouses. You can't, the bathhouses have hot water. You can't go take a hot bath, even if it was heated before Shabbat. Okay? Now, our Mishnah is talking about after this Gzeirah. So it seems to be an old Gzeirah, meaning back in the times of the Tanoim, meaning, or whatever, the Chachamim. It's not something that came post the Mishnah. It came, earlier, before the destruction of the, good morning, Boker Tov, before the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash. So therefore, the Gemara asks, why are you telling me that the problem is I can't bathe with this water, I can't use it for bathing, because we treated this water that was heated up through the pipe in the water Severia as if the water that we heated up on Shabbat I can't bathe with. Even if it wasn't heated up on Shabbat. Even if you don't treat it like water that was heated up on Shabbat. If you treat it like water that heated up even before Shabbat, you can't bathe in such water. Any water that was heated before Shabbat, you can't bathe in. So the fact that the Mishnah states we treat it like water that was the problem, you can't bathe in it, because the only waters that you can't bathe is the waters that were heated up on the Shabbat through this pipe. Why? Even if it was heated up before Shabbat, you shouldn't be able to bathe with that water. That's the Gemara's point. That the Gemara says, if we're talking about washing your whole body, are you telling me the only water that you can't use to wash your body is water that was heated up on Shabbat? Water that was heated up before Shabbat mutar, you're allowed to go ahead and use to bathe in? For Tanya, we learned that a bright Shabbat. water that was heated up before Shabbat. If you heat up water before Shabbat, you could only go ahead and do what? You could go ahead and rochsin. You could wash your face, your hands, your feet of a local gufa. You can't go ahead and wash your whole body. So what is this water that we're talking? What is this bathing, washing? What is this washing that we're forbidding by considering this water as if it was cooked on Shabbat? To be continued tomorrow, everybody. Have a great day. Hopefully we'll have more people tomorrow. We got to try. We got to talk to the people. Okay. Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye, Asaf. Bye-bye,
Thank you,
Ronnie.
Rabbi.
Good to have you, Ronnie. Welcome back.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you. Good to be here.
It's clear? Everything clear?
Everything's good.
Very good. All the best.
Thank you too.